What's up everybody, my name is Dreamer, and in this video I wanted to show you how to make an insane and very emotional future bass song. I have this kind of project that I have up here. This thing is kind of inspired by Porter Robinson, as you can see, and a little bit of Kid, but like the principles that I show you here can be applied to any future bass song. So I'm gonna start with the intro. So I have these chords here played on an electric piano. And in a future bass song, the chords are the most important thing, in my opinion, because they define like the whole mood of the song. So these are the chords that I came up with. This is on an electric piano. Okay, so for the intro, I have the chords that I just showed you, but I also have this vocal shot. And the reason I have that, or this vocal chop loop, and the reason I have that is because without it, it's making it really boring. If I just remove this, this is the intro. And that's just, it's really boring, essentially. So I added this vocal shot, and the way I came up with this, I'll explain that later. I also have a low pass filter on actually the vocal shot and the electric piano. Then we come into the verse. First I add an acapella. This is an acapella that's from Cymatics. It's from the Spectrum Acapellas collection. It's the coming down thing. I use the dry vocals and then I process them myself. And I also have this background ambience kind of stuff. Oh yeah, the only thing I actually add are these background things and the acapella. Falling down and then rising up, reach the clouds in a state of flux, rolling through the sky, I forget the faces. Do you ever wonder why we try to find these places? Then we move on to the verse. Here I add a little more things. For example, I add this kind of sine wave pad thing, this right here. What this is a serum patch. It's very simple. It's just a sine wave. That's basically it. And then, as you can hear, it kind of slides between the notes. And the way I do this is that I have on legato down here at the voicing section. Most people, when they use the slide function, they turn it into mono. And when you turn it into mono, it means that it's only one note can play at a time. But when you turn off the mono, you can play several chords at the time. And if you switch on always, it will slide between the notes, even though you're not playing them over each other, like this. If I had turned off the always, it's not sliding between the notes. So I have the always turned on, portamento to around 60, 65, 69 milliseconds. Yeah, and I also put an EQ, just lowering all of those frequencies where the sine is really at, as you can see. If I remove this EQ, it's just really annoying constant frequencies in my ear. So I just reduced some of those frequencies. I also have a love filter on. This is for the sidechain later on. I add this very subtle piano that you can hardly hear in the background. It kind of works as an arpeggiator. So this is how it's played. You can hardly hear it in the mix, but it's still this arpeggiator right here. You can hear that in the background, and it brings up like a nice background touch. I also add this flute, which is playing a simplified version of the drop melody. This flute is from the Analog Lab. This is Strawberry Flutes, probably my favorite sound at the moment. What else? Yeah, I have this clock. So the way I made this is that I have two versions of the same clock. The Cashmere clock called Grandpa's clock. I have one which is pitched up 6 semitones and also fit to the time, of course, or the tempo of the project. And then I have one which is at the standard pitch, but the volume is a little lower, as you can see. It is creates a nice kind of it creates a nice rhythm to it, to have one at a higher pitch than the other with this one a little lower volume. Then we have this part right here, I think. So I guess this is the breakdown or something. I don't know. But anyways, so I transition from like the verse to the breakdown part with some effects. Then I add a couple of more elements. And here I'm also going to show how I made the vocal chop. Yeah, I guess I'm just going to start with that. I found this vocal chop loop. It's from the Trap City sample pack by Cymatics. This one right here. I am pretty sure it's free. It's just vocals, and then there's this vocal chop right here. So with that, I made this vocal chop right here. So that's what's playing here. The only difference is that I have halftime on it, so it sounds like this. And then what I did to create this was that I just took the first part right here of the halftime version. Just that, and I exported that to audio, and it became this one shot. I also add this saw bass underneath everything. This is just a harmor. So the way I made it was that I took the unison up to 9 voices. I made it kind of detuned, pitched it down 2 octaves, and then added some low pass to it. I also add these cinematic drums. So then I add some strings finally. They sound like this. So this is actually 2 different types of strings. We have the string section and then the solo. So where you can find these sounds is if you go to packs, then instruments, orchestral, then we have all these different here. So I'm using the string solo and the string section. The string section are playing the chords, and then I have the section, the solo strings playing like a, I wouldn't say melody, but like a top note on top of the chords. And then I add another pattern for the solo, this right here, which plays like a higher pitch. Then we move on to the build-up. So what I add here is I add these claps and snares, just going up. So what I've done with this, they are both in the same mixer track. This one right here. I have an OTT and a compressor just to glue them together a little more. Then I have an EQ with a high pass on it. What I'm doing with that is that I'm automating the high pass so that after a while, when you get more and more into the build-up, the snare and the clap will get more high passed. I also have a pitch automation on the snare, this snare. Then I also have a reverb. What I do with the reverb is that I automate the dry and the reverb, or the wet. So when I play the build-up, you will see that the reverb is increasing and the dry will after a while start decreasing. What this is doing combined with the high pass is that it will kind of fade it out when the build-up is rising and then the drop comes. It's a nice effect. I also have some effects to build tension before the drop. Then we have this break before the drop, playing the acapella. It's a sub drop, fill, and then the vocal chop. And then it was the drop. So the drop is kind of simple. It's not very complicated, but I will go through it. So the drums are kind of straightforward. We have 2 different kicks. So we have like one standard, more generic trap and future bass electronic type kick. Then we have an acoustic kick on top. This is EQ'd so that there is no bass or low bass in the kick, because all I wanted from this kick was the punch of the acoustic punch alone, this sounds alright. But when you add like an acoustic kick on top of it, which is high passed, it just gives it more punch. Then we have a snare and a clap. So we have one clap and a snare. Combined, they sound like this. Then we have, I added this glass breaking effect because it layered really well with the main snare. I also have this reverse snare. It sounds kind of weird alone, but I promise you it sounds nice in the mix. Then I have these toms. As you can see from the chords here, we have these little breaks. This is where the tom is coming in, just filling out some of the space. So that's how that sounds like. Then I have this effect, this sweep, that just sweeps into the snare. Then we have this percussion loop. With the rest of the drums, it sounds like this. Then for the second part of the drop, we add this hi-hat pattern. And this percussion top loop. I put a pancake on this, which is modulating the pan of the song, so it moves from the left to the right, just creating like a nice effect, as you can hear. Left and right. Yeah, and that's about it for the drums, I think. Yes. Then I can move on to the chords. Sound like this. So I have like these breaks in between, as I previously mentioned. That's just to create more groove and variety for the drop. Because if I just had sustained chords going through the entire song, it would just sound boring, essentially. So this is just a serum patch. It's a saw wave with 16 voices. I have 2 oscillators. You don't have to use 16 voices when you're creating this these super saws. You can use 8, for instance. It works almost just as well. It just creates a little bit fuller sound when you use 16 voices. But if you don't have the CPU for it, then you don't need to do it. So yeah, I have 2 oscillators. One which is at a 0 octave, which is about this much detuned, and then I have an octave higher, which is slightly more detuned, as you can see. The only effects I'm using on it is a multiband compressor, or OTT, inside of Serum, and then I have an EQ and a standard compressor, and of course a sidechain. So yeah, it's not that complicated. I'm only using one plugin, as you can see. I'm not stacking a lot of layers to make it sound full, because I can just use one Serum patch and it sounds great already. So yeah, then we move on to the bass. This is how the bass is sounding. So the bass consists of 2 layers. We have this one right here, which is a patch I made myself. I'm using the acid wavetable. It's analog, and then it's just the second one right here. I pitched it down too, and then I have some frequency modulation from B, which is just a sine wave, to make it more crispy. Without it, it sounds like this. This also have a sub and some white noise, just to make it sound more full, fill out some of the frequencies. With the effects, I have a hyper dimension, a distortion, as you can see, and an OTT. Then for the post-processing, I just had an EQ, lowering the high frequencies, because I wanted a bass that was purely based on like the mid and high frequencies. So I cut out those for this one. Then for the other part, I have this mid and high focused bass. Sounds like this. Really raspy. This is just a preset. So what I did with this to make it sound like it did was that I had an effector on it with the Vox mode. That's how it sounds like it sounds. Without it, it sounds like this. And while that sounds good, I wanted something to be I wanted it to be like different, because that sound right there is kind of like generic and ordinary, and it just stands out a little more when I put on the effector. I also have an EQ, just removing all the bass. Then we move on to the melody. It sounds like this. So this lead consists of two different layers. We have this serum layer, which is essentially two sour waves, one with 6 voices and one with 5 voices. Then I have sync warp mode on here, and then I'm modulating this. You can see it's from the Alpha 1. What I'm also doing is that I'm modulating the pitch to kind of create like a vibrato, just to make the sound more interesting, so it's not just a sine wave playing or saw wave. So I modulate the pitch up here, and then I go to the matrix and turn the output very low, so it doesn't sound like that. When you do this in Serum, it's important that you have on the bipolar settings right here. The other sound is just a preset from Harmer. It's the hard lead right here. The only thing I've done is that I'm turned off the reverb, because it comes with a standard reverb, and then I've added that myself manually, and then I have turned on the slide. As you can hear, it's kind of pitched to the left, and the reason why it is panned to the left, and the reason why it is panned is to give space to each other. So this one is panned to the right, and this one is panned to the left, and together they kind of fill each other out. So yeah, that was lead. What else is there? Yeah, I'm playing a simplified version of the vocal chop, so it sounds like this. Oh yeah, by the way, for the melody I have these pitch envelopes, as you can see. Then I have these filler sounds down here. So this is kind of like a growl bass, and just a pluck complementing the melody. This bass is also Serum. I am using the trilobite wavetable. It's in the spectral one, the final one. It sounds like this. So this LFO right here is modulating the bend minus on the wavetable. As you can see, it's kind of stretching out the wavetable position and the level. It also modulates the volume of the sub, the filter cutoff, making that yah kind of sound. In the effects, we have a hyper dimension. It's modulating the mix of both the hyper and the dimension. It's modulating the drive of the distortion, mix of the phaser and the depth and frequency. And it's modulating these two peaks in the EQ, creating more of that vowel-y feeling or sound. Then I have a vocodex. Without it, sounds like this. And then we have a saturation knob, just bringing out more of the high frequencies, because you lose some of those high frequencies when you use the vocodex. These plucks are just this sound from Harmer. Those two different sounds. It's playing 2 octaves and then 1 octave. The highest octave is kind of pushed forward a little bit, so we get that bling, kind of like a bell. So yeah, that's basically all the elements I use. And then when it comes to like the rest of the song here, I'm just rearranging and adding more sounds and different sounds in particular areas. I'm not creating a new total sound and then using that. It's just all about arranging. That's how to make an emotional future-based song. I'll play you a little preview of it in a while, but I just wanted to say thank you for watching first. If you enjoyed, be sure to subscribe and leave a comment if you have any suggestions for what I should do next. And yeah, I'll play the preview for you.
Falling down and then rising up, reach the clouds in a state of flux, rolling through the sky, I forget the faces. Do you ever wonder why we try to find these places?